Let's talk about this Amazon Prime special. I think it's about to rain, so it's a perfect time to just cozy up and talk about this amazing docuseries. If I speak too slowly for your taste, please just put me on double time because this will probably be long. I want to get it up tonight. It's Saturday, July 12th. It's almost 5 p.m. Bless the Lord, I don't feel like doing much editing, so I want to talk about it in one fell swoop. There's 4 episodes. It's called One Night in Idaho, The College Murders. It's on Amazon Prime. I put the link below. Boy, it is a tearjerker. There was one thing that really stood out to me. Emily Allant, she's one of the friends of the victims. Her boyfriend is Hunter Johnson. They're the couple who went in and actually, well, Hunter at least, actually discovered the bodies. What she has to say is important. Dylan Mortensen, one of the surviving roommates who was on the second floor, the one who actually saw Brian Kohlberger and his bushy eyebrows. Dylan opened up to Emily. Emily said, Dylan, quote, battled with, what if I actually knew what was going on? That line stopped me in my tracks. It was the end of episode 3. I had to go back and literally look for it. I like to put subtitles on so I know what people are really saying. And of course, she wasn't victim shaming Dylan. I'm not victim shaming Dylan. But whoa, Dylan was battling with, did I actually hear what I heard? The other surviving roommate, Bethany Funk, down on the first floor. Dylan ran down to her room the night of November 13th, the morning, November 13th, 2022, when Brian Kohlberger just went into this random house and took 4 beautiful souls. We're going to see the impact. Well, Bethany didn't hear anything. So Dylan kind of talked herself into, well, maybe I didn't hear anything either. But the way she opened up to Emily, boy, I hope there is a season 2. We're going to talk about, will there be a season 2? Will Dylan and Bethany appear in season 2? What's going to happen? Let's go over all of this. This docuseries, 4 episodes, season 1, it was completed before the plea deal, before Brian struck a deal so he wouldn't have to engage in front of the firing squad in Idaho, or however it would have come to him. Brian took a deal. So obviously this Amazon Prime documentary was taken up before the deal. So there's been 2 documentaries. I still owe you guys another one, the Peacock documentary. I've watched the whole thing. I plan to do that next. This Amazon Prime documentary, both of the documentaries are about this 2022 crime. University of Idaho students murdered. These documentaries were released within about 8 days of each other, within about 9 days of Brian just pleading guilty. I guess that was the date they would have been released anyway. July 11th was the plan. These people being interviewed, of course, didn't know he was going to plead guilty. They were expecting a trial, even though one girl, I think it's Emily, says, man, it'd be great if he just pled guilty and, you know, we never see him again. So she was kind of prescient in that way.
Prescient.
Very, very good. So emotional. So will there be a season 2? We'll go over Peacock's The Idaho Student Murders in a different video. For now, let's dig into these 4 episodes I binged yesterday. And before we even start, you might notice that the Gonzalez family was not in the documentary. And I heard so many different reasons why. People were saying, oh, it's so tasteless. Why aren't they in there? I heard a couple of rumors that the Gonzalez family might be in a contract with Netflix to do a different series. I haven't confirmed that. I don't know if that's true. I mean, already there was that lie running around on Twitter where somebody created this post or some Hub Pages website talking about Brian Kohlberger is going to sit down and talk about why he did it. And his parents are going to do a tell-all and they'll get paid for it. It just read like so much rage bait. People really know how to rage bait others. And some people have turned it into some serious cash. I mean, I was thinking to myself, it might be more boring over here, you know, me trying to get court documents, read actual facts, try not to blame people. I tend to only kind of go in on people who have actually been arrested or there's a mountain of evidence against them. I don't try and go crazy on people who have nothing to do with nothing. Anyway, there was that rage baiting article and people got all crazy over it. And Brian Enton literally called. He called lawyers and it doesn't sound like it's true. So people do things just, for money, to get views, to get rage-baity views, and sometimes it works with people, but to me it doesn't last. I heard maybe Kaylee's family wasn't invited to the Amazon Prime thing, which I don't think is true. Or they're going to do a Netflix thing. Maybe they will, I don't know. But from TV Insider, I've linked to it below, they've done interviews with the documentarians of the Amazon Prime documentary, asking was there a reason that Kaylee and Xana's families weren't included in the doc. Director Liz Garbus told TV Insider, "We were hoping to include everybody. We were so fortunate to have had both the Laramies and the Chapins be involved with us. Of course, we would have loved to have everyone come join us, but different folks are taking different approaches to how they want to get their story out. I completely respect that." That was kind of a diplomatic way of saying, I don't know why Xana's parents and Kaylee's family didn't appear in the Amazon Prime. Of course, the directors know. I don't know. They're just keeping it under wraps. They were also asked, are you hoping to do more episodes now that Bryan Kohberger has accepted the plea deal? Director Matthew Galkin of the Amazon Prime special, he said, Liz and I are totally open to it. There's nothing official in the works right now, but if there is more story to tell, and if there is an appetite with our partners to tell it, there is an appetite, we're all watching this, we are 100% open to doing it. I know we discussed this in the first interview. Are you still hoping to contact Dylan and Bethany at some point about sitting down? Matthew, the director, said, if we do decide that there will be a continuation and we would go back into production, certainly we would be honored to have Dylan and Bethany sit for interviews for sort of a next round. But until it's official, there are no plans to do that. That was a good hint, and maybe once Dylan and Bethany see how well done this documentary was, how respectful it was to even people who have never spoken out before. Once they see that, once they know they don't have to testify now, I think it could behoove them to tell their stories, especially Dylan. They're going to talk about all the hate Bethany and Dylan have gotten, which they should have never gotten. This documentary has helped me understand not only Bryan Kohberger more inadvertently through the whole way it's done, his friends, the stuff his former classmates have said. It's also helping me understand Dylan's plight more, what she went through, how powerful denial can be. So when we get to that part, maybe we'll talk about it a little more. You'll see it in context. So I figured out the filming for this Prime documentary, it took place a while ago. It must have ended around the end of 2023, right around the time the house at 1122 King Road was being torn down, because it was torn down December 28th, 2023. And director Matthew said, one of the last things we shot was the house coming down. That seemed like a good place to stop for now. And then after that, he interviewed Karen and Scott Laramie. Those are the parents of Maddie Mogen. So the interviews were actually the last thing we ever shot for the series, because it took a long time to build that kind of trusting relationship in order for them to feel comfortable enough to talk to us. Whatever these directors did, they did it right, because they got people to talk, open up. People, you can tell, kind of hated the media or hated the press, the way the press descended upon Moscow and everything. They had literally never talked to anyone about this case before. Some of it's logistical, but that seemed like a really good place to stop. If we weren't going to involve and include the trial, that seemed like the best spot. So that was the plan. So now, we will hear from them, Karen and Scott Laramie, Maddie's mom and stepdad, and you'll see just the names on the screen from the closed captions, so I won't have to keep repeating who's talking now. Hunter Chapin, really good. Oh my goodness. He's Ethan's brother. His interview makes you want to cry. Maisie Chapin is Ethan's sister. Jim and Stacy Chapin are Ethan's father and mother. David Barriacho, I think that's how you pronounce it. He's a Sigma Chi brother of Ethan's, and he really talks about, I don't want to say his life was ruined, but the sleuthing done on him, the unfair blame he got, it's really good. Josie is a friend, Ashlyn Couch, Ava Wood, Phoebe McGrath, DJ Myers, he spoke well. All these people are friends of the victims. Then there's Josh Ferraro. We've talked about him before. He went to DeSales with Bryan. He called Bryan like a robot. He's like a robot, like he's not even human almost. Brittany Slavin. She also went to DeSales. Then there are reporters, journalists, Lauren Patterson, Emma Epperly, Ben DeWitt. He's a news editor. We're going to hear from people from the University of Idaho, Blaine Eccles, Courtney Franklin, the hero police officer, chief of police, WSU, Gary Jenkins, the one who used to be at Pullman, the one he said, no job for you, basically, to Brian Koberger. And he had, that security guard save integral footage on Stadium Way that could have been deleted. And then we'll hear from the admins of the University of Idaho Murders Facebook page, Christine Cameron, Alina Smith, and even Art Bedich, however you say his name, the mayor of Moscow. His part is really good too. He talks about, boy, why are you putting me in front of a camera? Put a cop in front of a camera. So we'll go through this pretty quickly. It's just something you'll be able to binge. It opens up with, this is where I found my best friends. You know how the intro goes. It shows our friend group was together. That was our world. They have all these different photos. This is all we need. All the girls, Xana being zany, and Ethan's humor, just showing these college kids having the best times of their lives. Nobody would ever have imagined what happened. And they show news clippets. Their bodies are found. And Emily says, I knew something tragic had happened. The whole entire world knew who Moscow was, and who would do this? That was the main question. And these people were getting death threats, Hunter and Emily. Jim Chapin says, look, I want the story out there, just the right story. The question everybody wanted to know was why? Why these 4 kids who did it one night in Idaho? So they start off in Moscow, and Karen, she looks so much like Maddie, or vice versa, just dropping her daughter off at college, parking for the orientation. Moms were hugging their daughters, and she's like, no, I don't want to do this. She's wanted to ugly cry. I know, I did that when my son went to college. And so they're showing photos, and she always knew she wanted to be a mom. I could relate to her story. She was a very young mother. She was only 22. Look at Maddie, so cute. She was always so protective of Maddie. Beautiful, peaceful little girl. Cute little girl. She always made sure she was comfortable. Me too. You don't like the bassinet? All right, come sleep in our bed. You don't like the crib? I'm not going to fight this. I understand. She didn't want her to have a moment of sadness. Now, Scott came into their lives when Maddie was 3. So there's Scott Laramie. He's very cool. He called Maddie just a character. They were like mini-me. They looked alike. And one time Maddie said, no, this is my dad. And then she met Kaylee. And so they have a photo of Kaylee's family. Maddie and Kaylee were inseparable. You think they were sisters. Kaylee was a powerhouse. They have different old snippets. When you watch it, you'll see, just their social media presence growing. From the 6th grade on, basically they were besties, like sisters. Hardly a moment that Maddie and Kaylee weren't together. They were applying even to the same colleges. Wanted to go to University of Idaho. It felt right. She knew Maddie would be safe there. And they became members of Alpha Phi. And Kaylee played pranks. One time she glued her lip up. And she's just saying, I'm with the FBI. Do you have a second? So Maddie made Emily feel included at the University of Idaho. She was one of the cool girls, pretty, super funny. And this other woman, Ashlyn, they were kind of the older girls, and they were together in the same sorority. Xana is like a Barbie girl. She was a wild child, they call her. She didn't know a stranger. She was the only name that I remember because Xana said, my name is Xana. It's like Xanax without the extra X. And there Emily's talking about, okay, these 2 cute boys, Hunter and Ethan, showed up. They're twins. And then there's DJ, they're friends. But Ethan and his twin are like 6 feet 4 inches tall. So Ethan, he's a freshman. He's from Mount Vernon, Washington. He's a triplet. Hunter just said, they would all go to him, even though they were triplets. It's like, I want to call them his younger siblings, but they were triplets. His sister and brother would go to Ethan as if, he were the oldest. So Stacy talks about, and Jim talks about doing IVF and finding out they were having triplets. And they're like, okay, we're doing this. What a great thing for 3 kids, your 3 triplets, to spend time together. They show video of Xana at 1122 King Road. It's a very iconic place. It says King Street is known as the party place. Then Ava talks about meeting Xana, hanging out at that house, very close to them. Ava lives here, 30 seconds away from 1122 King Road. Maddie and Kaylee living on the top floor, Dylan and Xana on the second floor, Bethany on the basement. Dylan is Emily's little. In sorority terms, that means like a little sister. Everybody else knew they liked each other. Oh, this is for Emily and Hunter. Well, no, she's talking about Xana and Ethan liking each other before, they knew they liked each other. They're talking about Parents Weekend, the most amazing weekend. They talk about one in September. Then Stacy says something like, little did I know November 13th would come. So it started off like a normal day. Hunter's like, I slept at Emily's place. They got a call. He didn't think much about it. Emily and Josie's apartment is close to 1122 King Road. And so Dylan would call, and she said, something weird happened last night. I don't really know if I was dreaming or not, but I'm really scared. Can you come check the house? Emily's so funny. Dylan was saying, just come over, please. And it's so funny. Emily's like, oh yeah, should I bring my pepper spray? So they're all describing how they're friends with each other. And it's not like Dylan or I guess Xana hasn't called before to say, please come over. And it's always like nothing. Like, oh, a pan fell in the kitchen. They heard some weird noise. They haven't locked their doors, but Dylan called, and so they started walking over. Dylan and Bethany had already exited the house, frightened. Emily's saying they were like, their hands were on their mouths, like, I don't know what's going on type of thing. So Hunter Johnson was in the house. The girls were hanging back. As soon as Emily stepped in the house, you could feel it, something was wrong. The stairs are immediately when you walk into the left, walk upstairs, there's the living room. They describe the layout. Then all the way down the hall is Xana's room. So I wonder where Xana was laying. So Hunter was ahead of Emily. She sets foot in the house. As soon as she got in there, Hunter was like, somebody go call 911. Hunter had enough courage to tell them to call the police, not for the real reason, she says. Hunter saved all of us from extreme trauma. Hunter saw what happened. So it's really technically 11:56. Dylan called 911. She was hysterical. So, they took the phone from her, gave the address, 1122 King Road. It's like, what happened? And people just didn't know. Hunter said, he was shaking his head and said they didn't have a pulse. So he must have checked their pulse somehow. And he knew there was blood there, but he didn't tell the girls. The paramedics came, they never came in. The paramedics had all their bags and all that, but they never came in. The cops must have told them. So Hunter woke up. Oh boy, someone was shaking him at the Sigma Chi house. Hunter, you gotta wake up, There's cops on King Street. What do you mean? He's like, there's cops right in front of King Street. And Hunter's thinking that's probably normal. They get more noise complaints than anywhere on campus. He chuckles nervously a lot. So someone else is looking out their window. This girl, she sees her friend standing outside at noon, and it's like, wait a minute, the police are putting up caution tape. Now that's different. She ran outside. She saw people crying. Dylan made a comment of, I can't believe somebody would do this. And so this girl's whispering, where's Xana? And it's like, she's inside, and I think she's dead. I think all I wanted to do was go wake Xana up, and I knew I couldn't. So Hunter, he gets to walk over to King Road. He sees all these people he's been hanging out with. They have this look on their face. When he walked up, he said they looked like the world had ended. And this other girl, Josie, is like, oh boy, we got to tell Hunter what's going on. Like, where's Ethan? They tell Hunter he's not here anymore. And it's like, well, where did he go? People don't, they don't want to say, oh, he's dead. And finally he says he's dead. Hunter's like, that can't be true. And then someone tells him Xana and Ethan got murdered last night. And he's like, I didn't even know how to respond. Somebody that I spent my whole life with. This is the part that really makes you want to cry. Whew. The first person he called was his triplet sister, Maisie. It's like, look, just come. Don't ask why. Don't ask questions. Have somebody drop you off. She sat in the car. I don't know who dropped her off. She felt like, she said she's going to cry. She felt like something was wrong. She just knew. Then Stacy got the call. Her phone started to ring. It was Hunter, and he goes, Ethan's not here. And Stacy's just like, well, just go get him. And he kept repeating it like, no, you don't understand what I'm telling you. They're not here. Ethan and Xana are not here. And Stacy's like, well, just go get them. And Hunter couldn't face the fact that they were gone. He goes, Mom, you don't understand. He's not on this earth anymore. And she's like, I didn't believe it. She didn't cry. She was in the grocery store. She just left her cart. She walked out. She was, chit-chatting with someone she knew. She told Jim Ethan was killed. And Jim is like, what? They pack some clothes up. They drive to Moscow. So, meanwhile, the friends are sitting in the driveway. The cops aren't telling them anything. None of the cops would talk to them. I think some girls start yelling at the cops. Hunter is like, what the F just happened? I feel like the cops should talk to us. We're sitting outside. Like, why are we just sitting here? They were asking. Where's Kaylee and Maddie? Their phones are pinging. Maybe they did Find My Friends. I don't know, maybe on Snapchat or something. Dylan really wanted to find out where they were. Everyone wanted to know. They got frustrated with police. They didn't know, are Maddie and, Kaylee still in the house? Everybody's texting. Everybody's like, what happened? I'm locking my doors. The fear began. They talk about Jake, Maddie's boyfriend. He called Maddie's mom. Karen's like, do you know what's going on? And he's like, there's been a homicide at the house. I think Xana's dead. And so Karen's heart sank. She called Maddie and Kaylee. There was no answer. Then she called the Moscow Police Department. They're like, we can't really tell you anything. And Scott was kind of downplaying it, her, husband, like, you're blowing this out of proportion. Let's just go down, get Maddie, have lunch with her, pick her up, see what's going on. So they got in the car, they got gas, they called the police department. She's like, I know you can't tell me anything, but can you confirm there's an active homicide investigation at 1122 King Road? He said yes. It was on speaker so Scott could hear her husband, okay, this is real. So they're like, let's go pick up, Kaylee and Maddie and, console her. She didn't know what to think. Oh, DJ Myers, he speaks a lot. He's the friend. And the cops still aren't speaking to any of the friends. They get that vandal alert, the one that got on my nerve because it said a homicide on King Road. Everyone burst into tears. So now it's 1:04 p.m. and they get this alert. And it's just like investigating a homicide. It didn't say how many, who, homicide on King Road, homicide being investigated. They're still like, where's Kaylee and Maddie? They get another vandal alert. Now it says 4 people near campus, like a quadruple murder. People are dead. And they're like, what? Nobody had told them anything. The cops hadn't even told them, look, Kaylee and Maddie are also dead. So some of the girls, I guess, were like yelling at the police officers. One girl was like, look, what the F is this? And the cop said, oh, I'm sorry. I didn't even know they were going to send that out. It's like, what does it mean? And he says, yeah, all 4 of them are dead. At that moment, that's when everything became real, at least for Ava. She was like, oh my God, what's going on? What happened inside of that house? DJ was texting Emily. He found out, there were wounds, there was a lot of blood. This was an attack, a malicious, attack. Who would do this? So they knew there was nobody that disliked them. So they all came down to the police station. So they knew, they saw blood, at least Hunter did. They took them one by one into an area with cops. Of course, they have to separate them. What were you doing the day before? Who would want to do this? But Hunter knew no one, who would want to do this? And they were trying to clear them. So the parents start getting to the police station. Maddie's mom, she just, this made me cry so much. Run upstairs, run, find anyone. And then they came into the back door, and then the officer finally told Karen, there's been a homicide at your daughter's house. There are 4 victims. And she's like, what? She says it made no sense because it doesn't. And then he told her Maddie was a victim. And she asked, what about Kaylee? And it's like, Kaylee's also a victim. These are the hardest part. So her husband, Scott, was so angry. He's like, this can't be true. I mean, this is Idaho. You see things like this on TV. Everyone's blaming it on the East Coast. And eventually they'll find out it was someone basically from Pennsylvania. But they couldn't tell them anything. They didn't have details. Their minds were circling. What could have happened here? What possibly could have happened in that house? So they were working the scene. People, of course, couldn't get near it. Karen was just sitting there in the parking lot. And she said, yeah, there's nothing we could have done. They were in the Moscow police parking lot. And Scott's like, look, you drop your kids off in a college town to get an education. Something like this isn't supposed to happen. They're supposed to be safe. Now, here's the news reports. One of the first here I see. Someone's been out in that neighborhood. Moscow police said they responded to a call for an unconscious individual. That's what kind of confused people. But of course, Hunter was trying to protect those girls from what he saw. So Jim Chapin, they got there around 9 at night. They went to the Moscow Police Department too with Stacy. And they're like these 4 incredible college kids. They're just gone. So at least the police or the university rented a block of hotel rooms. So all the victims' families, loved ones, and the surviving roommates, they could go somewhere. But they just cried out loud in the police department. They were all wound up. What do you talk about in that moment? Oh my goodness, everyone, the whole Chapins were like, what has happened to our family? Where's Ethan? Maisie couldn't sleep. Hunter couldn't sleep for days. Talk about fear. That's what Brian wanted to do. So they got them the hotel for the night, and they were so terrified. They didn't feel safe anywhere. Dylan, Bethany, Josie, that's when they really started crying. And Hunter explained to his mom, look, this is what I saw this morning. I don't know. What do I do? So people sat in the hallway. Hunter was in shock, as you can imagine. Can imagine the bloody scene he saw. Hunter was like ghost. The realism started to set in, and the terror came. Hunter didn't sleep that whole first night. Emily and Hunter went to bed. Every noise they heard, it's like, is someone there? Are they coming to attack us? The fear of the unknown got to us. Why would it happen to me? Why did it happen? Why wouldn't it happen to me? It happened to our friends. They're our best friends. Who's going to say it wouldn't happen to us? So they talk about, the news reports coming in. And then police start saying, oh, it was a targeted attack. And then that's all they knew. So they're thinking, wait a minute. To us, it seemed random. Emily said, we were a big group of friends. Why would you target those 4 people? So there's this realization, okay, we've been stalked for many months and we had no clue. She doesn't go into details there because they think they still have to testify at a trial, I'm sure. There's this murderer out there at this point. Now we're moving into episode 2. All they know is we're not safe. They got to get away from Moscow. I don't blame them. Oh, this guy, David, different people, their reactions. One guy pulled out all his guns. Other people just left town. They didn't have anyone in custody. So DJ was driving back home, I guess, saying the same things in his head. Why would something like this happen? Other people are thinking, what if this killer is one of our own? Karen didn't know what to do. She didn't know whether to scream or cry or be mad. So many emotions. She just didn't know. She was just on pins and needles. Because who would hurt these children in such a brutal way and why? She said, my child, why? I don't have any enemies in life. She's just stretching her imagination to think of who could have done this. It makes no sense. Scott calls it an outrageous act. It is outrageous. I mean, something that is made up, supposed to be a horror movie, literally. I think it's real life, but that's what I believe Brian was trying to create, his own real life horror movie. So Karen would hear a twig break or, it's anything would cause fear. Now they're moving to Priest Lake, Idaho. Hunter is saying every single night I'd make sure the door's locked, probably 3 different times because I was so scared to go to bed. I'm sure. Such a big member of our family wasn't there. They just slept, laid in bed, cried, cried, cried. Jim says many mornings just crying in your coffee. You know, you're just really questioning, how did this happen to our kid? And they spent a lifetime raising this beautiful Ethan. Their family members were calling like, what to do? And Stacy's like, nobody knew what to do. You're making plans. It happened so quickly, it was insane. At least Moscow PD did call them every day, update them, but it was really no updates. And it's so cool. Stacy and Jim invited Hunter out to their like lake cabin or whatever. I love that. Hunter and Emily, because they needed a safe haven. They needed a place. That's so awesome. They sat and just talked through what happened. And they were putting their brains together like, okay, what happened the day before? So November 12th, 2022, you know, they're replaying in their brains. There was a get together. Vandal football was that Saturday. Xana was calling Josie like, come over, come over. So there, she was at Xana's. It was the core friend group. You know, all the people were there. They were kind of pre-gaming. Hunter's funny. He's like, I was really drunk, to be honest. So Dylan and Maddie took pictures because someone had left their phone there. You know how people do when you leave their phone, and take all these selfies. They're really pretty. It was all dressed up. It was game day. They were outside. I think they were across at the White Houses, maybe, taking those pictures, not in front of 1122 King Road, but, you know, the pictures we've all seen, most of them. Oh, Maddie was on FaceTime, I guess, with her mom. And the last thing they said was, I love you, bye, and gave a hug. That was the last time I think Josie saw them. And then Maisie is, oh, Maisie, I wonder if how she thinks about this Betty's ball or whatever. So she went with her brother. Her brother was like her date. And, you know, Stacy, I can relate to this. She's like, you look at Life 360. She was feeling good. All your kids are home. You think, okay, they're safe. And Maisie, she just went to bed. And it's like Ethan was texting her like, Maisie, come hang out. Come hang out. Like, imagine if she would have hung out. But Maisie went to sleep. She didn't respond to anyone. We all want you here. Hello. Last one said, I love you. And Maisie says, that's weird because we don't say that to each other. So after Maisie's formal, there was a party at Sigma Chi. It was some kind of lodge party. And so they're talking about the party. We went to the party and partied for a bit. And so they're like, okay, you know, not everyone went. Because this one girl, I think Josie, is like, look, there'll always be another party. And the way you take things for granted, you know, like that'll happen. So around 1:40 a.m., that's when Ethan and Xana leave. And this one guy, David, he was a sober bro. He's the one who's caught all this hell from people online. This Sigma Chi brother, he was popping in and out of locations, driving people around, sober, designated driver. Last time he saw Xana, she was like, you got to come over more often. And he was like, oh, that was one of my biggest regrets. Because he never got the chance to. He just also took it for granted. All that house will, you know, always be there. At 1 a.m., around 1 a.m., Kaylee and Maddie were at the Corner Club. They took a Be Real photo. And so people are just asking themselves, is anybody at the Sigma Chi party? You know, what could it be? They have someone here, a reporter who writes for the local newspaper. Ben, personally knew Xana. He knows the sense of the gravity behind the tragedy, where he's like, a lot of news people lose their humanity. I can't believe this. You know, some people dressed up like students and would sneak in, and very bad. Lauren Patterson is another journalist in here. She works on stories that cover northern Idaho, and nothing like this had happened before, of course. The crime rate is so low. She used to go to University of Idaho, but Monday morning, they knew by that point 4 people were dead. People were panicking, people were fearful. And then they talk about Emma Epperly. She writes for the Spokesman Review. Her first instinct was try to get, okay, info from the police. Other reporters have questions. Who are these students? What happened? How did they die? They're trying to think through all the possibilities. Who could they call? Who's going to give them info? They would find they wouldn't get much info. Police put out a statement, but there was very little info. Tuesday, she finally got a hold of someone. She started asking questions. They're like, you're going to have to refer to our statement. She's like, okay, so you're not taking questions? They're like, no, we're taking questions. She's like, oh, but you're just not answering them? She says larger police departments have the PIO. They talk to the press. Moscow, nothing like this happened. So it was just one of the cops. And she was saying, look, we got to know what's going on. Can I come down and talk to you, do an interview? I'm not giving interviews to the press. So she does say in that vacuum, all these rumors came. So people are still texting each other. Students are telling other students, and the whole crime filters through the town. People are like, oh my gosh, did you hear? But there was a lack of info, solid info from the police. Nobody knew what happened. So this Ashlyn says she previously lived there, and people were claiming, oh, it was an open door policy. People could just walk in and out. She's like, I think that is not true. That house was a safe space for us. Hunter's like, oh, people saying it was a drug house. It was this, it was that. People selling drugs out of there. And they're saying, no, we didn't do drugs. Was it a fight at the party? Was this 100% a shooting? Was it, a robbery gone bad? And no, it was all these things. Oh, there's this rumor. Oh, they OD'd off of Ethan's stuff. And it's like, no. Even Stacy talked to her other surviving kids like, okay, is there something you guys aren't telling me? And they're like, no, it's not possible. So now November 15th, 2022, pretty quickly, dozens of reporters are filling into Moscow. This one got here on Sunday. There was just local media. By Tuesday, people from all over the country, national media outlets. There wasn't even a presser yet. They didn't even know how they died. So they talk about reporters, people related to the case started getting harassed. People followed home. I'm from CNN, MSNBC, not saying those reporters did that, but, just were all around. It was a media circus, they call it. Oh, and they show Brian Enton talking to one of the frat brothers. I like the way Brian gets out there and gets the story, but some people are, I guess, kind of criticizing that here, showing it in this documentary. Oh, Jim's phone kept going off. He was getting all these weird calls, like in 15 minutes, 8 calls. Hunter had 20 calls. Karen tried to go out to just, get her mail, and 2 people are like, ma'am. She's like, they didn't even know my name. First of all, that was insulting. And they wanted to talk about the situation. She just ran to the door. Scott didn't want to talk to anybody. They were rattled. They were afraid to leave their house. People wanted to have interviews. They didn't know anything. And Stacy's like, you don't want to talk to anybody. You can't even make sense of this crime in your own head. Hunter's like, look, you don't need to use me to get views for your news station. That whole thing pissed him off. And I was like, wow, Hunter's giving it to him, They have a simple life, basically, Karen said. To be thrown like their private house became national attention, so we see CBS Sunday mornings, everything. It's just all over the place. And the lack of info from the police, parents are calling, parents of students, they want answers. And this other school official, Blaine Eccles, dean of students, this crime in particular, he said it just shocked, of course, the whole town. Major crimes just don't happen. The mayor is like, the last time Moscow had any kind of homicide was 7 or 8 years prior. So they didn't know how to talk to the press. They didn't have a plan. So the mayor, in the first 3 days, it was the mayor who was up there trying to be the face. And he's going to say, look, somebody with a badge needs to get behind a microphone. It doesn't basically need to be me. It doesn't need to be me in so many words. He was the one who said, looks like a crime of passion, and people were like, huh? And so, yeah, I guess he didn't need to be out there. I think the best bet is just to tell the truth when you don't know what to do. Just tell the truth. But 2 full days after this horrific incident off campus, no news conference still from the police. And It wasn't necessarily malicious indeed. They just didn't know this small town, you're used to living your life, and then this monster comes in, takes away 4 students. You're just like, what do you do? You know, Mayor's like, get me off the stage, put somebody with a badge behind a microphone. So November 16th, Chief Fry got up there reading from his notes. And I like that he said, honestly, I should have been up here probably a couple of days ago. But he extended his condolences, of course, to family members, friends, University of Idaho. So he's like, look, I'm here now. We're going to give you the information we can give you. We care about the community. He did seem emotional. He talked about 4 people were stabbed. No weapon has been located. A stabbing is an intimate crime, like this reporter is saying. And Karen says she got a phone call. The only thing she knew that it was with a sharp object. And she's like, of course, that upset her even more. So you're saying they were stabbed? To think about her daughter, you know, and her daughter's best friend and roommates. It's unfortunate every time this one woman, I think it's Ava, sees the image of the blood dripping out the house. You don't want to have that kind of imagery in your mind. You can just imagine how they suffered. Scott said that really hurt. What the hell is this psychopath? Like, who did this? Basically, bloodbath. So there's still a person out there, Chief Fry is saying, we don't believe, you know, anyone else will be hurt, but see, they weren't sure. So he opened it up to questions, and that's when people started saying, okay, Emma's asking, wait a minute, there were roommates home at the time of the attack? And immediately Chief Fry is like saying, we're not focusing on them, we're focusing on everybody that may be coming and going. Was it a hostage situation? And he's like, no, it was not. And then people are like, wait, you have these surviving roommates. The incident happened about 3 or 4 a.m., but they didn't call, you know, 911. I don't think I said they were witnesses. And so the questions were lingering. Was it the same weapon used on, you know, all the victims? And they had to wait for the autopsies. But people were like, whoa, with that first presser, it brought even more questions. Fry's like, thank you for coming. We'll put out some more later, more info. Everybody's working on it, trying to do everything. Now, 4 days after the murders, it's November 17th. And they start knowing the names. The autopsy reports were released. You know, more information, death by stabbing, which is so weird. The coroner spoke a little bit. She said there was a lot of blood. It was a sad scene. You know, the interviewers trying to ask her, was everyone in the same room or whatever? And she's like, I don't know if I can discuss that. So pretty soon after that is when that gag order would come into place. Hunter is saying this would cause a lot of stress. They started monitoring social media. They're trying to figure out, okay, who did this? Then they find that grub truck video, well, the one that Kaylee's sister found. And they're looking at the grub truck, you know, footage. The only food source open in Moscow past midnight. They live stream everything. If you're bored, you can watch it. And that's when they saw, you know, Maddie and Kaylee ordering food after the corner club. They were just ordering. In the video, they start talking about hoodie guy. This is when hoodie guy in the white hoodie, everyone started like, you know, giving him a side eye because they're like, wait, he's kind of hanging out with them. But then when they leave, the girls leave to go off, you know, people are saying that guy looks suspicious. The footage goes viral. I don't even know hoodie guy's name, and I'm kind of glad. I'm sure I've heard it in the past, but I'm glad I don't even know him because, you know, so many people went in on him. And they start talking about all these cyber sleuths. They're showing all these different people. It could have been the food truck guy. You know, at some point, it looks like Maddie does say F you to him. They didn't want anything to do with this guy. Emily is like, well, we know who this guy is. That's a familiar face. Why is he being so sus? He was part of Greek life and, you know, people knew him. Could he have done it? So they were turning on each other. Not only were the sleuths kind of like, okay, what about this guy? What? And even Emily's like, look, I know who this guy is. She gave it to police if you need the info. And he's lawyered up, apparently, allegedly. And you know, some people start making stuff up like, oh, this guy's been bumping into Kaylee a lot. And it's like, where's that confirmed at? I don't know. Some stuff went, maybe too far. They're talking about the Facebook groups, the Reddit groups, people trying to solve the crime. They have all these different excerpts from YouTube videos. I don't even know which ones they are. And the dean of students is saying, these aren't professional journalists. They're just looky-loos. They're just sleuths basically trying to get some info. They threw ethics out the window. They dressed up as students, went into the dorms to try and find info. So that's not right. I mean, I know everyone wants to know what happened, and it's fine to get interviews, but my goodness, not like that. Maisie says she was bad about it. She was on her TikTok like every day looking at stuff, and they're showing different YouTubers like, oh, it was probably there in the, back space, that part that's dark enough. That's probably where, he entered over that cinder block. But Maisie's like seeing everything on social media. It was so hard. And they even have JLR on here, showing up at someone's house. Bizarre encounter with neighbor, it's called. Moscow, Idaho. People just looking. They said, oh, here, someone's saying it's symbolism. The fraternity sorority letters, or Ethan, Xana, rumors about one of the Sigma Chi could have done it. Maybe someone followed them home from a party. They had people targeted. Okay, so David, he was targeted, one of the Sigma Chi brothers. It came like a freight train out of nowhere. I don't even know why people targeted him so much. They're like, turn yourself in, punk. You did the crime. Serial killer. I can never imagine DMing some people this stuff. Hope you fry. People said he conspired to commit the murders. They're comparing him to somebody in this face mask. Yeah, they're tracking down his parents' place of employment. He was fearing for his life for a completely different reason. Oh, they're showing different YouTubers now. Mystery man connected to the murders. YouTubers found out the noise complaints, of course, at the house. Oh, Hunter had the zip ties around his wrist, remember, in the body cam footage. So people were like, what does that mean, And one guy on here is like, wrist tie guy. That was his name, Hunter's name, for a little bit. But they play some game called Champagne and something. They zip tie each other. That's all that was about. But of course, it became like this huge, oh no, Hunter's preventing people from entering the room. Emily, a lot of people went after Emily. I know what you did. We're going to come find you. These friends, conspiracy. And some video got 5 million likes. It was like a movie. People thinking Emily and Hunter were the murderers. And in the moment, it really impacted Emily. She started battling depression. She had anxiety attacks because she didn't let her emotions out ever, so her body did it for her. Oh, they were being called suspects. People thought, they killed them. This is horrible. Authorities should do an autopsy. It's pretty sad. It is pretty sad. They were just all so scared. And they're getting people and they're like, oh, we will find you. And Emily's like, they probably will. Why was Dylan spared? What about those 2 living roommates? I like they put all the people's names out there who made these comments. Dylan and Bethany. You mean to tell me, it's really bizarre they just slept through all of this? And it turns out, of course, they didn't. But they're calling Dylan a killer. You're lying. And it's Dylan's fault. Her friends died. Who could say that? She's being attacked so brutally online. Emily and Dylan, not Emily. Emily was attacked too. Emily, Bethany, and Dylan, and Hunter. So many people had their theories. They're being so attacked. People always suspect the boyfriend. So Maddie had a boyfriend, Jake. Jake would come to the house. So people were like, was it Jake that was the murderer? He was being attacked on social media. So he would, seek refuge at Maddie's house. That poor kid. He came over. He said he felt safer. Oh, how horrible. Oh, boy. Jake wasn't in Moscow the night it happened. He was in Boise. And then there was Kaylee's boyfriend catching hell. Reporters outside, it was ridiculous. It was hard to read things about Jack. They're saying obviously it wasn't the case because when it came to Kaylee, she thought the best of Jake. You know, she looked at Jake and just knew how great of a person he was. So imagine if Kaylee heard these things and how they were being stalked and how people were just accusing people randomly. They could create a story out of nothing. So November 20th, we finally have the second presser. So they're talking about misinformation, so I'm glad they're clearing people, you know, who are being attacked on social media. The 2 surviving roommates, they don't think had anything to do with the crime. Hoodie guy didn't have anything to do with it. Even though there's no suspects in custody, they don't have a weapon. At least they came out to say, in essence, clear people. Like, in essence, stop attacking Dylan and Bethany. So they were grateful they were clearing people being targeted or doxxed online. But a lot of people just dropped out of school. They deleted their social media. They were getting so harassed by sleuthers. It's so terrible. People don't understand the real life consequences it has. At least police were telling people this is who didn't do it. But, you know, I know that till this day, that didn't stop people from harassing them and attacking them. So in essence, that second presser, they're saying we're looking everywhere, you know. And they're like, how does one individual kill 4 people without waking up the other roommates? And they're saying, I can't disclose that info. He's like, I don't even know that info at this point. We're still researching. Third presser on November 23rd. Okay, so they're saying this was a targeted attack. Can you at least tell us who was targeted? So, you know, the community won't be as scared. And they're like, well, we said from the beginning it's a targeted attack, but to be honest, you're going to have to trust us at this point. November 28th, it's 15 days after the murders. People are like, you should just cancel it. It's Thanksgiving break. I don't want my kids to come back to that school. Some people did do their semesters at home. I don't blame them. They probably wanted to be both places. They had a vigil November 30th for the victims. But they're like, what if basically the murderer comes to this vigil? It was a lot of security. You know, Maddie's family didn't want to go down there. The person who did it, you know, might take some steps to do something else. Security was tight, you know, they had the metal detectors, cops everywhere. Rumors were flying. Oh, the person who did this, he's going to bring a gun. They had 30 officers not in uniform. Oh, and with Hunter, there was an FBI agent who did not leave his sight. So they didn't know who was behind the attacks, but they had to get through it all together. And Stacy spoke, so she came down there, Ethan's mom. The circumstances that bring her there are terrible. The hardest part, we can't change the outcome. They show the Gonzalez family there. They show these important messages. Make sure you spend time with your family because time is precious. Oh, this is the best part when they turned on their electric candles. Oh, and they said the names Ethan Chapin, Kaylee Gonzalez, Maddie Mogan, Madison Mogan, Xana Kernodle. The killer is out there. Could it be the person be standing among the students? A lot of locals are like, I'm worried this case is going to go cold. And the sleuths, we were still sleuthing. People are like, okay, the roommates are ruled out. They don't have the murder weapon. It's not Hoodie Guy. December 29th, 2022, finally. Okay, they start getting a call. Karen, Jim, the parents, they were already in bed. Karen says, the officer said, don't tell anyone, but we have a suspect in custody. So he was in custody December 29th. Now we're on to episode 3. It's moving pretty quickly. So this reporter gets up. She has multiple calls. It's like, what's going on? And she's like, yeah, they got someone. At this point, it took the case to a whole nother level. The FBI has Brian Koberger in custody, a man in his 20s. They didn't know who the heck he was. So they made an arrest from that horrific crime scene, the person responsible for it. But they're like, how's he connected to the victims? Any theory that, you know, Hunter had was going out the door. Like, who is this guy? The first time people saw the individual, they're like, who is this? Why did he do it? Emily didn't even think about the possibility it could be some random person. So December 30th, 2022, that's when we all see the major development in this case. They were going to hold that news conference. I remember this day because I was like, what name are we going to hear? You know, are we going to hear a name of one of these suspects? But then they say Brian Christopher Koberger. I remember like trying to write that down. I'm like, okay, it's not Kohlberger, it's Koberger. He's a graduate student at WSU. They couldn't release much info. They had to get him back to, Idaho out west. None of us knew, like, who the hell is this guy? The friends are like, this random guy. He has nothing to do with our lives. It wasn't some ex-boyfriend or some, Sigma Chi guy. And Hunter Johnson's like, Brian, I've never even heard of a Brian. Like, why would this random guy from Pullman do that to no one he's met before? Another thing, by design, Brian chose it for, I think, him not having any connection to the group because he thought, okay, maybe that'll make me get away with it too because I have no connection to these people. So now they believe the community is safe. Even though Brian allegedly asked, was anyone else arrested? Ava said, it's over. But no, Ava's mom said it's over. And she's like, nope, Mom, it's just beginning. Stacy was like, someone's out there on the streets. I'm glad they caught the person, Jim says, but as a father, you don't know where that person was. But there was a relief. Now up in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, Karen says, it took so long, 6 weeks, wondering about the crime until they caught Brian, not knowing why. It's somebody completely random, far away, makes it even worse. Now Brian's off in this Monroe County Correctional Center. He was behind bars out there, out east. He'll have his first hearing on Tuesday morning after the arrest, wreaking havoc the last 7 weeks, and it captures national attention. This guy just walking around, tall guy, more attention than before. Brian's being extradited back out west. People even went out to the Pullman Moscow Regional Airport. Crowd of people just waiting for Brian to arrive. He was driven to jail. The man accused of brutally murdering the U of I students. They expect him in his first court appearance. So they went back to the corner club. I guess people were celebrating, clinking their glasses like, we got him. We got that guy. My buddy drove him over. My buddy was a paramedic. People in town had a lot of pride about how the community rallied, and it wasn't one of them. It would have destroyed this reporter if it was one of them. It was a huge sense of relief. He's an East Coast guy. He's an outsider. But he went to WSU, but of course he wasn't from there. I remember reaching out to my counterpart there. You need to hold on tight, Blaine says, because look, all this media attention is coming towards you guys. So indeed, they were raiding Brian's apartment. They were reporters were digging through his whole background, and his field of study became a big thing because it's like, oh, he's studying criminology. Okay. He had been a teaching assistant. He would hold office hours. He would do a lot of things faculty members did. Criminal justice, criminology. He was living in an apartment just about 9 miles away from the crime scene. These two college communities right there on the border, 15-minute drive away. You can literally walk to one campus to the other. So it's like, okay, now it makes sense. He was in the area at the time. I mean, it doesn't make sense why he did it, but logistically we see how he could have done it. But the number one question, of course, which still is, it's why. So January 5th, 2023, this is after, of course, he's been arrested. They have a face to associate it with the crime, but that's all they know. We still don't totally know why, but I think this gives us more clues. But when he showed up in the courtroom, there was an eerie chill coming into the room. Oh, I could relate to Scott. So he's like, just seeing him, he was only 8 feet away, made me want to just take him out. I do not blame him one bit for saying that. But, Karen was holding on to Scott's arms like She was holding him as tight as she could, and he was shaking. She's like, I think we were all shaking, but he's like, I think my wife was afraid I was about to do something to Brian. So, murder in the first degree, maximum penalty, death. Do you understand? Yes. And Karen's like, she thought she was going to feel like, we're here, we're watching you, but he didn't look at them. Of course, Brian was instructed probably not to do that. And Karen's like, if he doesn't feel bad, why am I wasting my time so much on this guy who doesn't care? He's not going to make me a victim. That was so powerful. Stacy was like, look, sitting in the courtroom, why would I go sit in the courtroom with that person? She hasn't attended any of the hearings, and she didn't plan to attend any, because she's just like, it won't bring Ethan back. Why am I going to sit there with him? It is what it is. She says that a lot, like ipso facto, like we can't change this. Sitting there, glaring at Brian won't bring my son back, basically. So Scott is explaining to Karen step by step, we got to be patient. Scott watches a lot of true crime. He says, this is going to take time. So they got another press release, I guess, from Moscow Police Department. And then there's the gag order. The gag order goes into effect until a verdict is reached. And I'm like, hey, a verdict's been reached. He's entered a guilty plea, so they should lift that gag order. We'll find out next week, hopefully. They have another motions hearing on the docket. So because of this, the focus completely shifted to Brian Kohberger. So far, the police say we don't know much about him. How did they track him down? How did they zero in on him? Was he connected to the victims? They don't have any of those answers yet at that point. We still don't really know how he found the victims, why he chose them, but it gets a little closer. They're asking, okay, why did he do this? But this guy, Josh, he sees Brian on his TV. He's like, I know that guy. I guess his girlfriend's like, what's wrong with you? He's like, I know that guy. I went to DeSales with this guy. So Josh recognizes Brian. So he met Brian in the biology room. They were all being paired up for this project, and people were picking partners. Brian's in his leather jacket. He's just kind of being like, oh. And Josh was like, hey, you want to be my partner? He calls him incredibly smart, smart to work with, bouncing ideas off each other. And this other girl, Brittany Slavin, she is talking about him being a smart student, a forensic criminology major. She used to try and cheat off of Brian's test because he always did amazing, but he seemed to be a lonely guy. Josh even invited Brian to a party. He remembers that, and he commuted to DeSales, Brittany says, but Brian said no to Josh, no to the party. He called him an oddball. He's smart, but robot, purely based off of an inability to perform in a human, natural manner. At the school, they have all these high-profile professors like Catherine Ramsland. She spent 5 years talking with Dennis Rader, the BTK killer. Whew, he defies many of the formulas. So, of course, Brian Kohberger studied under her. You learn about serial killers, murderers, their motives. Brittany says right behind, DeSales, there's all these normal houses, but one house was built as a crime scene house. And they would leave clues from actual murders to help, the kids learn about how to solve it. They were sitting there quiet, and Brian would say, well, maybe the intruder did this. And Brian's analysis usually helped them get to what Dr. Ramsland wanted. And she's talking about different sides of a person. One person might be a church leader on one side and serial killer on the other. You can act as one person at work, but then another person at church. You show all these different sides. People with dangerous tendencies, they have one side they completely hide, and that lets them commit these crimes. Then they switch back to the other side of the box, and they're, the church leader again, or whatever. Wow, what a mask. So this reporter's saying Brian, he could ask all these horrible, debaucherous questions about murders and couch it as, okay, I don't look like a psychopath because this is my homework. But he did ask bizarre questions nonetheless. He graduated with a master's in criminal justice. You could be, Josh is saying, look, You could be a teacher doing horrible things to kids. You could be a coach of the football community and being a chameleon, blending in with society. They start going into where Brian grew up in the rural mountains of the Poconos. He seems to have been bullied, picked on a lot. When he got older, he was kind of a loner kid, which is sad. They show him, in that kind of military type training. He was a teacher's assistant once he got out west to WSU, and he was kind of off-putting to people. It wasn't like he had this long criminal rap sheet. I know his dad had him arrested once, but like this brutal slangs, was that his first ever crime like that? So the probable cause affidavit was released. January 5th, 2023, so we start digging and learning more details. They show law and crime. They're saying, okay, we've got all this info now. Let's talk about the key takeaways, because it's supposed to tell us at least enough basic info that the judge can say, yeah, you have enough cause to go arrest this guy. They get to see everything the investigators honed in on to say, oh, who's our guy? So they figured out, Brian's cell phone was heading towards Moscow. It stopped reporting to the network at 2:47 a.m. And just before 3:30, the white Elantra is seen making passes around the King Road house, 3:29 a.m. So that's when they believe the homicides occurred sometime after 4 a.m. Then 4:20 a.m., the white Elantra is seen, heading back a circuitous route. He's heading south from Moscow towards Genesee, according to the cell phone data. Kohlberger drove all the way south. Most people would drive like the main road or the airport road, but he drove through residential subdivision out of the way. He winds his way back to Pullman through some of the smaller farm towns. And then eventually, 5:30 or something, his cell phone was reporting back to the tower, like he, turned it off airplane mode. They found, okay, Kohlberger likely returned to the area. They found the knife sheath. We learned all this stuff from the affidavit. And this one student's like, oh, it makes my skin crawl knowing, oh boy, he was near my house. And Josh is like, he probably went back to get that sheath. He knew I messed up. Josh is like, he probably wore booties. He probably had a hairnet on. He probably was hoodied up. He probably had gloves on. Knowing that he accounted for every little thing. You can say you're going to do this on any given day, but almost 100% of the time, the plan has to deviate because you can't control the outcome. So Josh knows. Now, November 18th, 5 days after the murders, Brian had changed his registration from Pennsylvania to Washington. Maybe he was like, uh-oh, even though I drove this route, maybe somebody caught me on camera. Let me switch it out, change the info, deviate a little bit, throw people off the trail. But I know he had to be like, oh boy. Now, November 28th, Jenkins got the email. This is for law enforcement sensitive, do not distribute. He was chief of police for WSU, this hero guy, I call him. Look, just the license plate only. Don't stop the vehicle or make contact with it. But they're like, okay, let's just figure out who's driving this white Elantra. So a guy traveling, around the parking lot found a white Elantra, but it wasn't the correct years. They knew it belonged to Brian Kohlberger because of this previous stop for that previous traffic violation, him being in the intersection. And that body cam we've seen. We still haven't seen the other one that I hope we get any day now, I'm praying. The officer is like, thanks, she let him go, gave him a ticket, whatever. But they were looking for a 2011 to 2013 Hyundai Elantra. So that's why they could have caught him so much earlier. I mean, whenever that first went into that system, they could have caught Brian earlier, but they didn't have the right years of the car. So now they're talking about Papa Rogers, Christine Cameron, the admin of the Facebook group, the largest one, more than 250,000 of us in there. Okay, why is Papa Roger asking all these questions? Did the killer shower at the crime scene? They started getting a lot of Papa Roger reports. Like, okay, this guy is asking a lot of interesting, intriguing, weird questions. How did the killer hold the knife, in your opinion? Which hand? And people were like, wait a minute. And he even mentioned, of course, the sheath. And they started thinking, okay, something's not right with this guy. They admin a lot of different true crime Facebook groups, but of course, University of Idaho is the largest. They've seen a lot of stuff. They've seen a lot of questions. A lot of people will say, oh, I bet the killer is in here, because I really think Brian was. Because, he returns to the scene physically, allegedly, somewhere in Moscow, and then digitally, this is a way for him to return. How long do we think the killer was in the house? The way he phrased things as Papa Roger, which I believe he is, was a similar way of phrasing things on that Reddit survey. How did the killer leave the scene? How did you leave the scene? His questionnaire is like, okay, very similar. Did he clean up at all before leaving? Is there anything else you did? So it's so similar to Papa Roger. And his very first post caught their attention. Of all the evidence released, the murder weapon has been consistent as a large fixed blade knife. This leads me to believe they left the sheath behind. They must have found the sheath. And so November 30th, like, who was thinking about a knife sheath? We didn't know anything about it. December 7th, 2022, detectives were asking the public for help in locating the Elantra. So they did withhold certain information. They don't want to compromise the investigation, but again, they get to a point, they got to develop leads, they got to let some information out. So I'm glad they did. So people started seeking that white Elantra, but it was still the wrong years. People were going nuts looking for the cars. People, everybody in a white car, they're like, oh, is that it? Is that it? Screenshotting, friends texting each other like, I know a girl who has that car. Should I call it in? People were losing it about this. And then the night manager at the mobile discovered the surveillance video the same night, of a white car. And of course, Papa Rogers is like, I feel like that white Elantra isn't relevant. It's a red herring. So yeah, you can tell he's like, uh-oh. He's trying to throw people off the scent. Josh says people can get away with it for a while, but they'll want to involve themselves. The killer will want to involve themselves. This person is kind of like playing a game, like they want to have fun, show their intellect. Now, December 12th, 2022, 29 days after the murders, he's driven home and they show Papa Rogers like, is the killer still in town? So December 15th, he gets pulled over with his dad in Indiana twice, which is still weird, supposedly for driving too close. Like, how close was he really driving? They were just getting info, but I know he has that visual snow, situation. So was he really following way too close? Stopped twice? Maybe he was. He was pulled over a second time with his dad, and they're getting his license and registration. Maybe they were following him, tracking him. I mean, I'm sure they had their eye on them from the time, they had their eye on Brian, I'm sure, from the first time. Hopefully the WSU officer put it in the system, but, he didn't alert anyone because the car was newer. So anyway, they go off to Pennsylvania, day 32, and no motive, same as day 1. Papa Rogers is just like, I don't know, maybe he's really getting scared, but he sounds kind of cocky. So there's a text coming in from the MPD, and he walks, I believe this is Gary Jenkins, upstairs. Yep, there's a lead. It has something to do with WSU. We went over this in our last video. They had a suspect, and when they told me his name, it sounded familiar to me. Gary Jenkins is like, I think I've talked to Brian Koberger before. Spring of 2022, when Gary Jenkins was chief of police at Pullman PD, he had the criminal justice PhD. He has Brian's CV, his resume here, 4.0. Wow, 4.0 out of 4.0, master's thesis. Oh, I should try and look for those. He was a little bit awkward, Gary said. His communication style, Brian didn't communicate easily. He was a little bit more stuttered. And with a researcher and law enforcement agent, it's important to develop trust. And that was one area Brian lacked. That's why he didn't get the job. So they let Gary, no, Brian is a suspect based on the single source DNA they found belonging to one person. They did the genetic genealogy and they found, okay, Koberger. Somebody might have done one of those 23andMe tests or whatever, test I've done. My heritage, my DNA is out there in the system. So they were able to track down Brian, okay, from that sheath. Day 39, the killer is not in the victim's immediate circle, Papa Rogers is posting. So they're honing in. They're taking Brian's family garbage. They're making the DNA profile of Brian's dad. They get a partial match. They know, okay, the profile on the knife sheath. Using all that information, they believe who committed this crime? Brian. They wanted the warrant for his arrest. December 30th, here we go. They're going to do an arrest at his family home, and it's like police. They're going to do the search warrants at his office and at his graduate student housing back in WSU. They wanted to do it all together. So it was like police department, and that's WSU. And then we know they just break there and go in Brian's parents' house, and he had a blank stare. Brian was wearing latex gloves, taking out his personal trash, putting it in plastic bags. They got his black clothing, gloves. There was nothing at WSU. It was almost vacant. That's interesting. Looked like he planned on not coming back, and he probably didn't. And then Papa Rogers disappears. No one ever hears from him again. Not the real one. There's fake accounts being set up. They're like, he erased everything. The admins couldn't find him anywhere. And it's true. If he was a member, they should have been able to see something. They couldn't see anything. So all these people sleuthing, digging into Brian, you look at his profile on his mugshot, it really looks like he did make some kind of, cartoon caricature of himself. That's him, they're saying. It really does look similar. Like he just made himself look older and like in military gear. And they're like, look, he was on the page. This is the connection. He was on this page. They go back to Moscow. After the arrest was made, Hunter's thinking, can our lives be normal again? But he's like, the vibes and the energy around everyone just was not the same. They needed to move forward. But the suspect is in jail right down the road. And the house is this daily reminder. The story of the kids, emotionally, Karen says. You see it again. What's going on? Is it ever going to be normal again? Is it ever going to end? Karen figured out it's not going to end. She just doesn't watch the news anymore. People need to grieve and everything, but they're doing it on a national stage. And this reporter didn't understand as the case evolved why the attention kept growing. You couldn't escape it. Amateur detectives pieced together maps of the house. Some of them did some really great jobs. And the rooms, talking about Maddie and Kaylee, and then the TikTok psychics, people claiming to have spiritual abilities, talking about Brian acting alone during readings, talking about how police tracked down Brian. But there are still so many questions, indeed. Most people are like, why weren't the police called the next day? That Sunday until noon. And then we learned, Dylan actually saw someone. There was actually a visible witness. She saw someone in the house. And this is it. That's it. Emily says she's talked to Dylan. I think she's actually battled with, what if I actually knew what was going on? That really got me. Like when you watch it, tell me what you think of that. She's not, of course, shaming Dylan, blaming Dylan or anything, but I totally understand the denial. First of all, we can't discount the fact that a lot of these kids have been partying all day. They were drunk all day or, drunk or whatever. And then they come home. I mean, it's been a long night. Dylan was trying to sleep, and then she heard the girls chit-chatting, and then upstairs she heard noise, and we know from the affidavit she was like saying, shut the F up. At first she thought they were just being noisy, I think. But then I think when she started hearing maybe someone crying or someone saying, don't worry, I'm going to help you, or hearing someone say, I think someone's here, maybe all these things started coming together in Dylan's mind like, wait a minute, okay, maybe this is not quite what I'm thinking. And that's when she was texting and trying to find out info. And obviously she was scared. She ran down to Bethany's room, and the affidavit says she saw Xana lying there. I don't know where Xana was lying, but what if she was laying in front of her bedroom door? She hardly saw. In Dylan's mind, she probably knew, yeah, something bad is happening, but maybe her brain did something to protect herself. And she went down there, to Bethany's room, and Bethany didn't hear anything. And so maybe Dylan's like, okay, I'm tripping, I'm hallucinating, but they're not answering. Okay, maybe they are passed out, and then like playing on TikTok or whatever they did. Some people criticize that, but I understand it because the power of denial is so true. It's so real. And so it helped me understand Dylan potentially, according to Emily, struggling with, what if I actually knew what was going on? And I don't mean that like she didn't care, but maybe it was a way for her mind to protect herself. Like, I just saw a guy in a mask walk out of here. Some people don't just jump in their first mind to, oh, let me call 911. Of course, that's logical and normal, but who would expect this mass murderer to show up in the house, kill 4 people with a knife, walk right past you? I mean, she had to feel like she was having a fever dream. So I understand she went down to Bethany's, and eventually they fell asleep because they're like, oh my goodness, I don't know what happened. And then the next day when they still can't get in touch with anyone, and Dylan's like, okay, this wasn't a dream. And then Hunter and Emily come over, and Hunter sees what he sees. God help him and Jesus. Whatever he saw, he saved the girls from trauma. There was confusion. This is how real life happens. Everything isn't so neat and orderly and logical. That's why it does make more sense. So Dylan's like, what if I actually knew what was going on? But maybe her mind was protecting her from, some people might have lunged at Brian. Some people are fight or flight. Some people are, whatever the reaction. Some people do freeze. So I believe her. And no matter what, I don't see why some people are just like so horrible to these girls. Like, it's your fault your friends died. No matter what would have happened, I believe even if Dylan had run downstairs and called 911 right there and they responded within a minute, I think the scene was so brutal, I believe they already would have all been gone. So that was powerful. So they're talking about Brian standing silent, May 2023. So the judge entering the not guilty plea on his behalf. Now we're in the last episode 4. So they go back to the night of the murders. David, he even had weird happenings. He was near the King Road house at 4 a.m. and he was like, it's so quiet, eerily quiet. Usually you can see the last remnants of people leaving a party. It was silent. And he was like, oh. And Hunter even says, this is going to sound really weird, but that night me and Emily woke up in the middle of the night. As soon as Emily woke up, she saw Hunter locking the door. But David hustled up and got home as soon as he could. He's like, my intuition was telling me something was wrong. So the probable cause affidavit talked about what everyone was probably doing that night, painted a better picture. So Dylan heard the 2 girls on the couch on the wall near her bedroom, probably like in that TikTok we saw. She heard some noise. Everyone was asleep by 4 a.m. except Xana. Xana had her DoorDash being dropped off. And then the surveillance footage over there off Linda Lane, I believe, is catching, and the other surveillance footage, catching that white Elantra. So Dylan thinks she hears someone say, there's someone here. She's looking at her bedroom on the 2nd floor. At first time, she didn't see anything. Then she remembers hearing the crying, and she thought she heard a male voice say, it's okay, I'm going to help you. Video from next door captures the whimper and the loud thud. A dog barking can be heard. Dylan's opening her door a 3rd time. She sees the man with the bushy eyebrows. The person walked past her bedroom and outside the glass door. She just said she scaredly closed the door. Dylan got really scared. She started calling Bethany. Bethany answers. She was calling all of them, Xana, all of them. But, she's just like, what's going on? Someone needs to tell me who was here. Eventually, she decided to go for it, made a run for Bethany's room, asking Bethany, did you hear any of this? Bethany's like, no. So Dylan's like, oh, okay, I must imagine this. I'm drunk. I don't know. And if you didn't hear anything, let's just go to bed. So, of course, people are going in on the roommates. And I wonder if Bethany allegedly was at the plea hearing. I don't know. That's what people are saying. But I'm wondering if when she heard Brian's voice, did that like remind her of the voice she heard saying, that's okay, I'm going to help you. And this woman is saying, you're not going to be thinking logically in the manner that you would. With us sitting here talking, we're thinking logically. Folks aren't going to understand the behavior of someone who's been through trauma. We know Dylan and Bethany can hear these comments, and they're not speaking out for obvious reasons. She's going to say legal reasons at this point. But now that Brian has entered his plea, I think Dylan and Bethany can speak out. And the what if doesn't matter, because if she had known what was going on, it would have been too late anyway, Emily says. So November 13th, almost at noon, Dylan's like, wait, that may not have been a dream. So that's when she starts calling and saying something weird happened. I thought it was a dream. I'm not quite sure anymore. I tried to call everybody to wake them up. Nobody upstairs is answering. Emily's like, I'll come over. And that morning, it's like, Dylan wants us to come over. And then as soon as Hunter steps foot in there, he's like, get out, everyone, call 911. Dylan was completely hysterical. They're asking for the address, 1122 King Road. Police are entering, going up to the second floor, Xana's bedroom. They found her and Ethan dead of stab wounds. Then they go up to the third floor. That's where they find Maddie and Kaylee, multiple stab wounds. So they knew right away. It's like, who could have done this? Maddie could have been the target, most people think. Maddie would have been perhaps the first person the killer had access to entering the room. Was she the target? Potentially. He went up there. I don't know if he knew Kaylee was going to be spending the night. It's like, how did he find them? People are curious, but for him to stalk them, I don't even know how he knew where they lived. But a lot of times the perpetrator knows the victim. But, she's saying if Kohberger did it, because this was before his guilty plea. Did he know them at all? The answers we don't have yet. But when it comes to Brian Kohberger, we don't know much about him, just his school records. But I'm sure he could have easily found these girls just on social media. Oh, Josh says Brian was just someone who traveled to school and then bounced. He wouldn't get personal. He didn't have friends. He didn't talk too much. Not too many people paid attention to him. He had problems with girls. This person has problems with women. When you look at the victims, they're attractive. They're involved in the Greek life. They look like the popular kids surrounded by friends. And that's probably it. That's probably Brian was an incel, this reporter thinks. Girls made fun of him in middle school. He was bullied and tortured by a popular clique. So this Haley Willette, the one who she went on a date with him. Brian went inside her dorm room in 2015. He was tickling her. She's like, don't do that. And he got serious and she pretended to go throw up. She was hoping he would leave. And then he sent her a message saying she had good birthing hips. So does he have this rage against women? Since starting in high school or whatever, was it middle school or something when he was being bullied? Did he start looking up to that serial killer or whatever he's called, spree killer, Elliot Rodger? I don't know. Chief Jenkins talks about some student Brian followed to the car, trying to flirt with her, and she reported him. I want to know who that was. And then he got fired from his TA-ship. He was arguing with his professor. He was officially terminated. So that's what this says. So this reporter's pushing them for documents. I want to see the record. Me too. Again, it's tricky if there's rumors about his behaviors at school, but none of it's verified until we have documentation. So true. He's talking about, Josh is talking about the people studied, the serial killers, Elliot Rodger. They start focusing on him. This young man in college, jaded, hated his life. He could have had a great life. He lacked attention from women. And so he did this rampage, 7 dead, 13 injured, near UC Santa Barbara. First, he invited some friends over, supposedly friends, and stabbed them to death. Then went to firearms and went to a number of women, sorority women. He ended his own life in a vehicle. Then he wrote he had written already that manifesto. He's basically telling you, this is why I did it. This is why. He had this sexist rant, violence against women, and Elliot wrote, all these beautiful girls I've desired, but he could never have. They loathe me. They'll destroy me. And so they put two and two together. Wait a minute. Elliot Roger, Papa Roger. Elliot talks about hating the girls from Alpha Phi, where Kaylee was a sorority sister. So even back in the day, all the students were bothered by this incel actions of Elliot Roger. Brian wasn't bothered by it, according to Brittany. They talk about the incel community and just the hatred and how they made Elliot their hero and Brian their hero. Horrible. This immediate, the speed, the algorithm, the echo chamber of this incel community. And they don't feel like their, ideas are extreme in these online spaces. So it's like, is Brian confirmed as an incel? And they were like, oh, it's horrible. The stuff they write, I don't even want to say, it's just horrible. There was a whole subreddit, I remember writing about it. All these people, drop your skincare routine, Brian. Oh, my true crime shelf, like the little altar to Brian some people had, a Brian Nation flag. It's just so strange to me. People becoming more lonely and isolated due to technology. It's like they normalized the weirdest things. And then there were all these fake Insta accounts pretending to be Brian. Oh, this one girl got a DMs like, oh, sorry about the bitches I killed. Hey, it's Brian. Like, who on earth would do that? Maybe people think they're being funny or whatever doing that, but she's like, wait a minute, would someone try and copycat Brian's crime? But David is like, I want a mechanism to stop this kind of thing on social media because it's getting worse. They're showing the King Road house becoming this attraction, for people to, of course, use it as their backdrop. He's like, it's not an art exhibit. It's where this crime actually happened. So they call it overwhelming, the attention on their town. And then they seek the death penalty. It must be a rock solid case. They're saying his actions were especially heinous. He has an utter disregard for life. And that's so true. So Brian Kohberger could be put to death, they were saying at this point. So they knew, okay, it was going to take time. And Taylor is his lawyer. She's talking about, oh, we have so many records to go through, 51 terabytes of info. It's much more now. I was like, oh my goodness, how much are they going to give us? She's just like begging for time. It's impossible to do. We're not going to be ready. The defense has said it's going to take them, longer than the prosecution. It's not uncommon, but it does delay things. They're pushing back and they were pushing back and they were pushing back. Oh, this was perfect. Jim Chapin said, look, how can Brian ask for more time? I don't have more time with my son. And Karen said, they're just buying time. They're trying to find loopholes. They were trying to stall. Scott says it's just taking longer and longer. You keep putting it off, the more can happen. So at that point, the trial was postponed indefinitely. So they didn't know that, the August 11th date was coming up. But Maisie says, attention might die down and then it comes back again. There's something new and it comes back and, they're saying, just imagine if you're a student trying to concentrate on your classes for over a year. You turn on the TV, social media, and it's all about the Idaho 4. People couldn't let the case go. But people are saying, oh, I need to see stuff besides theories and what's been described. And some people are like, this entire court is a sham operation. But David is like, he thought it would stop. Back then, when you Googled his name, it would pull up this article. I noticed, I look for them. Some of them have been deleted, thankfully. He's like, how is this going to affect my ability to get a job? Hunter's like, there's these websites calling me and Emily killers. People are claiming, oh, these two are behind it. I hate when people do that. There's a bunch of speculation that Hunter and Emily did it. I know it draws the views and people are like, oh, but I never want to do that to someone. David is saying, look, people don't deserve my respect. They're causing unnecessary pain in the community. He went private. He didn't want to be online. He ended up deleting everything. Hunter Chapin, Ethan's brother, is like, look, I'm not trying to, you guys aren't helping with this. It's awkward with him talking to Amazon because technically that's still like news reporters, but I get it. Certain people, all their social media is private. Maisie's like, it's private. She was crying. A lot of people who had their stuff on public, they're in a college town and they're just posting stuff for themselves. Small town, people can figure you out pretty quickly. So people were making all these rude remarks. Oh, being pretty got her killed. And I can't ever imagine people being so cold to one another. Even if you don't know the person, you're just up there. I just would never do that. So they're talking about it really makes you think about your social media life. It just really makes you think. But in the end, they just want peace for the families. Hunter is like, we're just going to stay out of it. We don't need the media for anything. It's not like it's going to help them, bring Ethan back. This heinous thing that happened, Stacy said it's not going to sink us as a family. We've spent 5 months in the depths of hell. We just figured out, okay, we made a deal. We got to move forward for our family, for our friends. Wake up every day, just put our best foot forward. You forget you have a choice to just move forward. Get up and live your best life. She's like, I can't imagine what it's like for Maisie and Hunter. Growing up as triplets, like so close to have that kind of bond. And you just go life without them. But it is what it is, she says, like ipso facto. The thought of Ethan just not being there. She's like, those triplets, they barely spent more than 12 hours away from each other. So Maisie's like, okay, I like to say we're back to normal, but it's not really. She's just going to focus on the good things about Ethan, not everything else that's going on. And Jim talks about the memorial and having Ethan obviously cremated. He didn't know where to put him. And it's like, we can't do this right now. And I don't blame her. I don't blame him. And it's like, should we put him in a little crematorium? That just wasn't right. I don't blame them. It's not a place where you put, like, where do you put your kid, right? Where do you put your kid? So Jim decided the best place for him to be, Ethan to be, was home. So we'll sit in the basement, Jim said, until one of us passes. He's safe. Woo! This was hard to watch. He can go down anytime and talk to him, and he does. And I'm like, oh, Lord, oh. So Karen talks about where Maddie grew up, and she didn't get a lot of stuff back. The interviewer was like, did you not want it back? But I don't know, stuff that was able to come back. I'm not sure if some of Maddie's stuff was able to just go as evidence. I don't know what she meant. But she has that little Idaho sweater. The sleeves are still rolled up. They found that sweater first family weekend. Maddie really wanted it, sweatshirt. She didn't have it in the right size. And then she got back home or somewhere, and then they found the sweater. And then she saw Maddie on FaceTime cutting it. And she's like, what are you doing? And Maddie's like, this is what everyone does, Mom, don't worry. But she was very glad she got that Idaho sweatshirt back. And at first, Karen felt like, I can't do this. I can't do this. You are, she can just laugh about Maddie, talk about Maddie, not hold on to anger. She's saying a year ago, I couldn't have spoken to you at all. I couldn't have articulated any of this. It's taken friends, family time to creep out of that place. It's also reminding me, how would Maddie and Kaylee want to see you? Would they want you just in your jammies all day crying, or up and talking about how amazing the girls were? So she said, you never know how strong you can be until strong is all you can be. It's just come to a place where she feels her presence. So now it's talking about 1 year after the murders. So DJ is speaking about how it changed his life. Once you lose someone you love, he says, you gain an angel. We have amazing angels. He talks about Ethan being very witty. People keep talking about Ethan and how funny he is. Minions, tonight we steal the moon. That was cute. He gave this great story about Ethan's favorite place was like Taco Bell. He wanted to open up all his little Taco Bell, sauces first, so he wouldn't, have to stop. While he was eating, he could just feast. And so DJ's like, that is so funny. Now when he goes to, Taco Bell, he opens up his sauces first. little memories are just replay in his mind. Xana would do in these backflips and she would fall and she would hop back up and say, I'm okay. And they would call her DJ Zan because she would bring her MacBook everywhere. It didn't matter. And she would jump on a table or a chair or whatever and just party. So all these things, their friends reenacting how Maddie would dance, like putting her hand out and bouncing. She didn't care who was watching. And Kaylee was so happy and ambitious, and she would go for what she wanted. She could experience anything. She was going to live her life. She just decided it and did it. And whenever there's a nice sunset, they'll text each other like, oh, Kaylee saying hi. The sunset is crazy. So they're just kind of going over the memorial. It's important to remember the good times, be grateful for all the relationships with Ethan, Xana, Kaylee, and Maddie. And to know them was to love them. And they took a moment of silence. And I think the world has been made a better place. It's important to emphasize who they were, not just as victims, but like real life people, friends. So it's not like it'll ever be accepted what happened, this horrible thing. And so they're showing now Emily and Hunter. It's like, I guess they still live together. We don't know in 2025 their state, but they're just showing them cooking, living a normal life. They said they were forced to grow up. There was that moment, where this whole situation forced them to grow up. I guess they graduated. And Emily has a whole different outlook on life, and I feel for her. She had a vision of what she wanted her life to look like, and she's given up on some of her goals. She realized she's just a different person, but she's working on the new her to set a place for goals again. Oh, and this other girl, Josie, I guess, she hangs out with a totally different people. She honestly wants to hang out with people who didn't know the victims, which is weird to say, she says, but I understand that too. And Ava is moving out of her off-campus apartment, which she loved. The window faced 1122 King Road, and they still had the caution tape up at that point. So this is before they had even torn it down. And Hunter's like, his first 2 weeks back were so hard. It was like separation anxiety almost. He said a lot of people helped him get back on track. His window was on the very end, which faced the opening where that house was. So he would wake up every morning, open the blinds. The house was the first thing he saw. He wanted it to go away. They tore it down December 28th. It was a haunting reminder of an unthinkable tragedy. And U of I said it was time for its removal to allow the collective healing. And now that I see there's not going to be a trial, I'm like, maybe they did do the right thing, You don't want Hunter waking up or people waking up having to look at that house every morning. Before, I wanted them to save it for the jury, but now they don't need to. So I guess it didn't matter that they tore it down. But Josie was saying, yeah, it'd be nice if he'd admitted what he did, and she ended up being right, Brian admitted it, and he's going to jail. It's frustrating to see nobody has it right. So many people talking about Brian Kohberger. Emily's like, he's just a loser. The only true story should be about their lives, getting the story right. It feels important to tell. I like it, Hunter said, instead of some random ass person. This is what I believe too. These are the ones who lived it. They're the only ones that can tell us what they went through, not us out here trying to speculate. But they talked about just loving them, loving the girls. Karen will cry about them. She will continue to keep them alive. And they ended it. Maddie Mogan, Kaylee Gonzalez, Xana Kernodle, and Ethan Chapin, just the beautiful photos of them. And then they put in that last bit where it's like, oh, we need to put in a little bit of what happened here. On July 2nd, Kohberger's defense team entered into a plea deal with the prosecution, and Kohberger pled guilty on all counts in exchange for removing the death penalty, accepted a sentence of life without parole. So that was it. And they talk about, Chapin family establishing Ethan Smile Foundation to provide scholarships and everything. Maddie Mogan's friends and family run the Made with Kindness Foundation in honor of Maddie, Kaylee, and Xana. Mission is to provide scholarship funds, grief wellness seminars, on-campus safety awareness. So they're doing things. 1 Thessalonians 2:13. And we also thank God continually for this. that when you received the word of God concerning salvation, which you heard is from us, you welcomed it, not as the word of mere men, but as it truly is the word of God, which is effectually at work in you who believe, exercising its inherent supernatural power in those of faith. So this documentary was amazing. I love the focus on the victims, their positive attributes, who they really were as people, and their families, and how everything impacted them. The crime, of course, Brian Koberger. I see why he went for them if he really did, honor Elliot Rodger and want to do it and go after Alpha Phi girls or sorority girls or the popular people, and how he found the house was probably easy if he saw them on social media. And then it's easy these days pretty much to find out someone's name, Google it, find out where they live, and just enact his plan. If that was known as the party street, it would have been like, oh, Brian knew if I attack people in this house, this will get the most attention. These beautiful people he knew in true crime, unfortunately, certain stories I do, if they're not considered a certain type of victim, then it might not get as much attention. Different people, I'm like, they don't get necessarily the same level of attention. So many cases I could go over. But Brian knew, studying crime, he knew, oh, if I do this to these particular people, make it so horrific, so bloody, I'll get all the attention. And then what? Because what tipped me off is his former classmates when they were saying that Brian, it was almost like he wasn't there. So either he was getting heckled or whatever those girls did to him back in the day, which is not right. If they were bullying him because he was overweight or weird or whatever they thought, of course that's not right. But unfortunately, Brian parlayed that into thinking, okay, I know how to get some attention. And maybe that's why he did it, because it's like, this is how I can get attention. I've studied crimes. I know the kind that have captured the nation. People didn't realize, they're like, why is Moscow getting all this attention? Well, it's like 4 students, beautiful people, well loved, struck down in such a violent way. Brian knew this will get attention, at this college, sorority girls. Did it build up? Brian trying to flirt with that girl, following her to her car, not realizing that can make women uncomfortable. Or, struck down with Nayoung Ko, or, she was willing to befriend him and even stayed at his place or vice versa somewhere, according to Dateline. But that didn't work for whatever reason. I don't know if they were beyond friends. We don't know a lot about that. Getting into it with other colleagues and then losing his TA-ship. Did he plan in his mind, yes, I am leaving this WSU apartment forever. I'm not coming back. So if I'm leaving this town, let me take these 4 beautiful lives. Was that the plan? We'll see. Again, we still have so much more to learn, but this was really well done. I still plan on going over the Peacock documentary next. We can see some of the Gonzalez family. Really well done too. Their reactions, I like seeing how all the loved ones reacted, how they cope. And I pray for all of them. Pray for them to know they will see their loved ones in heaven, in Jesus, and hold on to that type of hope and know they have a comforter, a God to pray to in Jesus, and just to get through. Oh my goodness, I cried. I just cried and cried. So if you watch it, expect to cry. Thank you for watching all this. Take care.